a year and a day since Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, of course, yesterday we talked about this with Delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the Virgin Islands in Congress. She told us that Donald Trump was very slow in terms of getting funds to the islands. But that's not the only way Trump has turned his back on U.S. citizens, which, of course, people in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico are American citizens. As Hurricane Florence approached the U.S. mainland last week, he dismissed an official Puerto Rican government report that said nearly 3,000 people died as a result of Maria and its after effects. Now, to correct Trump's lies and to tell us what happens to people in communities after a disaster, we're joined by Howard University Associate Professor Dr. Terri Adams. Doc, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
So it was... First of all, let's just cut to the chase. Trump don't give a damn about black and brown people, okay? The reality is he was totally indifferent. He went down to Puerto Rico, sounded like a complete ass by saying, oh, you guys are messing up our budget. As Stacey Plaskett said, he wouldn't even visit the Virgin Islands, met with the governor on a ship there, still has not visited. And this is somebody who, again, if it's involving black folks, does not care.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that, you know, he is out of touch, and he's out of touch with his own administrators of FEMA. FEMA issued a report on itself that was very critical of its own response, and it noted that it was underprepared, that it had only prepared, I should say, for one disaster during the hurricane season.
So the current FEMA, Donald Trump's FEMA,
yes,
did their own report.
Exactly.
And they admit it.
Yes.
They didn't do a good job.
Right.
But he called it an unrivaled success.
Right.
And an A+.
Right. So I would say that we should actually rely on the report of the agency that was responsible for actually responding to the disaster.
That's interesting. I have not heard that report discussed on mainstream media.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead.
So the report indicates that, as I mentioned, that it had only prepared for one major hurricane during the hurricane season in the Caribbean islands, and that most of its resources went to the response of Hurricane Irma. So you had, you know, less than 10 days after Hurricane Irma, we had Hurricane Maria, and so
as in, like, we couldn't see that they were formed at the same time. I mean, anybody can look at a map and go, okay, there's one hurricane that's approaching, there's one coming from behind it.
Right.
We might want to watch the one behind it because that could impact the same place.
Absolutely. So we have the technological capabilities of predicting when the storms are going to hit. But in terms of getting the resources to where they need to be, it needs to happen days, if not weeks, before the actual storm hits. And because of its location, the FEMA has to be strategic about how it approaches the way it gears up for such storms.
But what I don't understand is, even looking back, and I understand how we want FEMA to be in charge, but when Hurricane Katrina happened, the mayor has to ask for help from the governor.
Right.
The governor has to ask for help of the federal government.
Right.
And then that's when the federal government takes control. So what we saw when General Russell Honore went in, you had when he came in, that was Blanco was waiting for Nagin, and then when Nagin finally said we need help, then she asked for help. He then comes in. Did we have any Honore type figure in Puerto Rico, in the Virgin Islands, who was like, I'm the one in charge, and we're gonna deal with this?
I would say the governor of Puerto Rico, as well as the mayor of San Juan in particular, were very outspoken in the needs that their needs and the required resources. But you could talk all day, but it depends on who's actually listening and who's responding to your needs.
No, well, because again, this is what people don't understand about our U.S. military. When they go into a place, they can erect literally towns overnight.
Right.
They can elect an electrical grade overnight.
Right.
I mean, we have a level of capacity that I think people really don't think about when you have these. So all this stuff about, well, okay, the power, and yes, they had power issues before, but for Puerto Rico to be in the dark that long,
right,
it's crazy.
I agree with you, and I was going to make that point, and I'm glad you made it, actually, that I think we need to rely on the military in these kind of conditions, and why we didn't, I have no idea, because we did in the case of Hurricane Katrina. I think the backlash from some of the images that Americans were viewing, people stranded in floodwaters, people on rooftops, kind of made the government take a critical look at what it was doing at that time, and kind of brought up that we need to have the military step in. And we should have had the same thing in this particular crisis.
Greg Carr, I want to just bring you in here. Again, I mean, this is utter indifference.
Of course.
Kanye West made the comment, George Bush doesn't like black people. Oh, it's real clear for Donald Trump. And frankly, look, he saw white folks in North Carolina, and he's like, hey, we got to get there real soon so I can help pass some food out. And he was ticked off, according to Omarosa, she said on this show, that he was ticked off, that the mayor of San Juan was criticizing him, and he said, the hell with Puerto Rico because she dare criticize me.
Of course. Well, we know the child in chief. We know who he is and what he isn't. And you know, it's good to hear my colleague Dr. Adams talk us through this. And by the way, again, that's why independent black media is important. Where else in the world are you going to see a person who spends a lot of her academic work practice dealing with disaster relief? That's one of her areas of expertise, a black woman. But, you know, in talking through that, we know the military has the capacity. They're in the Carolinas right now. They sent everyone down there and they were ready to deploy. All they needed was the word. But we know Trump doesn't care. We know that now they're talking about sending Ben Carson down there in the next couple of days because he's only worried about his image. At the same time that, you know, the George Washington University report came out, the Harvard report came out, the death toll continues to rise. But finally, the most important thing that Donald Trump has mastered, and this we have to give him, is that when you disconnect completely from the truth and just keep repeating the lie, you reveal the fact that this country really isn't interested in truth. It's all about power. You can't stop him. He's just going to create a different reality. So all we can do is try to create our own base and move to help ourselves.
We are still in this space. As an expert in this space, we've now seen African Americans. In fact, we talked about it yesterday when Trump shouted this Cajun Navy. He actually was talking about a boat that the new Black Panthers actually sent down there. And what we're seeing is African Americans. We saw this take place after Katrina. We see African Americans say, you know what, we can't depend upon the Red Cross because of how they've screwed up the number of dollars that they've actually raised as well. And we're seeing black folks say, no, we need our own institutions where our people are being impacted to be able to go into these places and provide assistance. We saw folks, my wife was involved with a group of folks who were helping churches in Port Arthur, in Houston, and some other areas as well, because we used to be able to depend on a Red Cross, but even they can't be trusted these days.
Well, I would say that a lot of smaller communities are forming to meet the needs of its local community areas. I should say small organizations are forming so that we can't just rely on the government, unfortunately, to meet the needs of the people. And so people are stepping up, pushing forward and taking care of the people on the ground. The folks in Puerto Rico, there were many people who teamed up together to help their neighbors. They always say that the first responders are the people next to you. And so we saw that happen during Hurricane Maria, and we're seeing that happen now in the Carolinas.
What if you were sitting before? First of all, obviously we haven't had any hearings because Republicans don't want to even have any hearings. What would you tell Congress folks should be preparing for now?
Okay. I would say that there are some Congress folks who are actually interested in actually looking at these issues. And I would say to them that we need to listen to the people, listen to the voices of those who are suffering. We need to understand that there are both short-term and long-term impacts. People are suffering emotionally, economically, and socially. It takes folks a while to gear back up to living life as they normally had lived before, or reconstructing a brand new life. And we need to put measures in place so that people aren't suffering. So we talk about, we've talked a lot about the infrastructure, putting in buildings, houses, resources, but how do you help people with their mental health? We need to make sure that we have measures in place so that people aren't struggling through these types of crises on their own.
All right, Doc, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.